Oxford from the inside. The good, the bad, but always the truth.
Hello and welcome to Oxford from the Inside, the good, the bad, but always the truth. I'm your host Ellis, and today I'm going to be talking about maybe the most popular Oxford team sport, which is rowing. And joining me today, I've got Charlotte. So please introduce yourself. Tell me what you have to do with rowing as well as the kind of usual stuff.
Yeah, so I'm Charlotte. I'm a fourth year biochemist at Trinity, and I am the president of Trinity College Boat Club, but I've been women's captain and I've been secretary as well. So I've worked my way up.
Yeah, well, we were both on the committee
together.
Yeah, a couple of years ago, I was secretary. It was, fun time.
It was fun times.
Yeah, no, it was good. So for people who don't know, what actually is rowing?
So I think a lot of people have seen the boat race. So it's like 9 people in a boat. There's 8 rowers and 1 cox. And you just kind of try and row as hard as you can. We always say that rowing's a bit like a deadlift sitting down, which suits me quite well. I like to sit down. So like the cox is there to steer the boat and like shout motivation, make sure everyone's doing the same thing, because the most important thing in rowing is that you're all in time and working together. Like it's a really good team sport because you have to be doing the exact same thing. If one person is slightly out of time, it slows the whole boat down. Like you're better having 8 rowers in time that aren't very good than like 8 rowers who are all doing different things. And then there are 4 pairs in the boat. There's a stroke, stern pair, and then like the middle 4, and then the bow pair. So the bow sits right at the other end of the boat to the cox, and they are kind of the first person traveling forward, and then you have your stroke who's setting the rhythm for the rest of the boat.
Yeah, so you're quite a rare breed, right? Because you both coxed and rowed.
Yeah, I think it tends to be, not many people do both because your coxes tend to be quite small and petite, but in your rowers, obviously you want muscle and stuff. But I think in Oxford, it doesn't matter. Well, at college level, it doesn't matter too much. And our college definitely had a shortage of coxes at one point. So I figured I'd give it a go, but I enjoyed it a lot more than I thought I would. It's quite enjoyable to shout at lots of people early in the morning.
Yeah, that was always my favorite part. I found it quite cathartic because when you kind of get dragged out of bed first thing, it's nice. The first thing that you do is to kind of let off all that bad energy.
Definitely, you can let out all the anger you have about your degree.
Yeah. So you mentioned about like college level. Do you want to kind of explain like I guess the level above that within Oxford?
Yeah. So the university has like 4 university squads. So they have the 2 blue boats, so the women and the men, and they do the big boat race that's on television against Cambridge every year. And then there's 2 lightweight squads, which has like a weight limit. So you have to be under a certain weight. And they also do a race against Cambridge. And but they tend to train a lot more than college level crews do. They're training like every day. And it tends to be people that have either rowed before or have rowed for a few years for a college, like went at Oxford and have rowed for a few years at Oxford. So they're very high level athletes. It's quite impressive.
Yeah. And I think one of the big maybe misconceptions, maybe sometimes the truth about Oxford rowing is that like it takes up your whole entire life. From your experience, like what's the kind of training been like? Like what's an average week?
I think it can take up your entire life if you want it to, if you're very keen. I know the thing we try and do at Trinity is we try and cater for every kind of dedication. So for me, like it's probably, if we're allowed on the river, it's like 3 or 4 outings a week. So that tends to be like 2 early mornings and 2 sessions at weekends. They're like an hour and a half each. And then we'll do like 2, maybe 3 land training sessions in evenings. So they're quite often on the rowing machine, but we also really like to do like bodyweight circuits. So for me, like it takes up a lot of time, but because you're doing it with like people you've made friends with, it's quite a nice social event as well. And a really nice break from sitting in a library and doing work, and you get to go outside. Like it's a really nice change. So I don't mind doing lots of it. But there are people who definitely do a lot less than I do, and there are definitely people who do a lot more than I do. And I think it's quite nice that most college boat clubs will cater for like a range of people, and therefore you can kind of put in whatever you want to put in to an extent.
Yeah. I think one of the really nice things about college rowing, like especially when it comes to summer 8s, which is like the summer rowing competition, is like a lot of colleges will just enter like a beer boat of people that don't train, and like they just kind of get on the water like on the day of the race and go, and I think that makes it really fun.
Yeah, definitely. Very entertaining to watch them race as well. But there's definitely been a lot of people in the past few years that have just been pulled in for racing and can just give it a go despite not training. So it is doable.
Yeah, definitely. Can you explain like the different kind of races, like what goes on throughout the year?
Yeah, so the university level clubs obviously train for the boat race, which is just side-by-side racing, very traditional rowing race. And then in Oxford and Cambridge, they do a thing called bumps racing. It's the only two places they do it. It's quite hard to explain, but basically in Oxford, 13 boats line up along the river, and they're about a boat and a half length apart. And then a cannon goes, it's very Oxford, and you have to try and catch the boat in front of you before the boat behind you catches you. It gets quite carnage at points, I would say. It can get very messy and there are occasional crashes. And then so we have torpids, which is in Hillary term, and then we have summer eights in Trinity term. And it's really nice, like loads of people come to watch, especially the Saturday of summer eights, because it takes place over 4 days, Wednesday to Saturday. Yeah, loads of people come to watch, and the bumps record is being kept for hundreds of years. So like it's really interesting seeing how your boat club's done. How your boat club's done over the years. It's really impressive.
Yeah, I think before COVID, like the last time that we were disrupted was kind of like World War II or something like that.
Yeah, we've been disrupted obviously because of the pandemic, but before that I think they've had occasional things rained off, but like the last proper disruption was the war. So it's a very continuous event, and yeah, it's really interesting to watch. And as president, I get alumni emailing me and being like, oh, and we like did this in bumps, and I can go and see it on the chart. And there's a little chart in the boathouse. It's very cool. And you can get blades in bumps races, which is where you manage to catch the boat in front of you every day, or you can get spoons, which is where you get caught every day. But obviously that's not what we were aiming for. And then the blades, we like chalk on the walls of the quad in college, which is really cool. So you can see like there's some from like the 1960s that are still up. It's really cool.
Yeah. So last season, you and the women's second boat of Trinity actually got blades, right?
Yes, we did. That feels a lifetime ago now. So much has happened since then. Yeah, I coxed. We had quite a strong boat because we had a lot of people that hadn't wanted to train, so we didn't want to put them in the first boat, but they were very strong. Yeah, it was an amazing thing. It's very high adrenaline, I would say, racing is. I mean, you probably would agree. So it's very nice when you catch the boat in front and you have a big victory. It's always great.
Yeah. How would you describe like the experience of actually coxing in races? Because I remember, I think all throughout torpids and summer eights, I remember every single time a race started being sat on the bung line, like the kind of starting point for the boats, and thinking like, oh my God, I'm gonna die. This is horrible.
Yeah, my first ever bumps race, we were like top of the division, so we had no one in front of us, so all we could do was get caught or like stay top. And I just remember being like, whatever happens, I need to just steer us in a straight line. Like I can't crash. This is like the big day. I can't crash. But I think I found the most stressful experience, like, because when you start off on a bumps race, you like have to attach yourself to this thing called a bung line, like you were saying, and trying to get into position and like make sure I wasn't like directly heading for a bank as soon as I set off. I found the most stressful part, I think. But no, like just felt a little bit sick, high adrenaline, and just kind of shouting absolute nonsense and hoping that something was good.
Yeah, it's so hard as well to kind of prepare any kind of like cox calls, which are the things that you say to the crew that like make sense and make, really like energize the crew, because you're like steering, you're trying to look behind to see where the boat is, like you're looking ahead. And as well, like I think it's hard when you're rowing with people who are like a lot taller than you, because you can't see it over eight very people's heads. No, it's a nightmare. I remember as well, before the start of my first ever bumps race, I managed to single-handedly get the race delayed because when we had to go down to the bottom of the river and kind of spin, so we were facing the right direction, I managed to get the bow end of our boat caught in a tree, which was really...
I've seen the pictures.
yeah, the pictures are bad. It was really not good, and it just made the situation so much worse.
Yeah, I mean, we finished a race and I went to land the boat on our raft and the bow ball just came off. I landed so badly. So I then had to go tell our boatman who's in charge of repairing the boats. And I was like, oh, I lost our bow ball, which is just basically a ball on the end so that when you go into another boat, it doesn't put a hole in it. And he was like, oh, you must have really caught the boat in front of you. And I was like, it's just me trying to land. I was so relieved to be done with the race that I'd switched off.
Yeah. I guess to kind of go into something a little bit more deep than us doing terrible things while in charge of a boat. Do you think that there's like a big misconception around rowing in Oxford?
I think there's definitely a feeling that you have to have like rowed at school, and it's quite a rich person sport. I guess I would say it's quite a privileged person sport, and I think that's probably maybe true at a school level, although I think it's becoming less true. There's a lot of like initiatives like Fulham Reach, I know, are doing a lot of outreach things with schools in London to like teach them to row at school. But I think the really nice thing about Oxford rowing, and obviously I mean this at the college level, is they cater for like such a range of people with different experiences. So you don't have to have had the opportunity to row before, because I know lots of people can't have had the opportunity, won't have had the access to it. And then you learn to row at Oxford, and there's the facilities all laid out for you to learn to row. Like all the colleges have coaches that will teach you from like absolutely not knowing. Like people come not knowing how to swim, not knowing how to do anything, and then you put them in the boat, and by the end of the year, they can hopefully win a race. Like I didn't know how to row until I came to Oxford, and now I like feel like I at least have a vague understanding of what's going on with everything. So clearly it works. But I think like that's the big misconception. And you still get it with people like coming down to the boathouse and being like, oh, I don't really think like I'm meant to be a rower, like I didn't do it at school. And I'm like, probably over 50% of our boat club didn't row at school. So it's a misconception, I think, that it's a bit of an elite sport.
Yeah. And I think as well, it's a really steep learning curve once you get in a boat. And I think you generally, like if you've got good coaching and, you know, rowing doesn't get disrupted by pandemics or continuous terrible weather, like I think you learn very quickly.
Definitely. I think one of the things I always say to novices is do not give up after your first outing, because you sit in a boat, you're like holding this oar, and you're like, I don't know what to do with it. All your limbs are meant to be moving. Somebody's shouting at you. There's like so many people. And then I think like eventually it just kind of clicks. And like you say, it's a really steep learning curve. Like your first outing, you might be horrendous, but by your fifth, like you can row in an 8 and you're fine. So just like sticking with it, I think is a very key part of rowing.
I think when I saw a boat for the first time, I didn't expect it to be anywhere near as long as it was. And like the blades as well, which are like our name for oars, they're like what, like 8 feet tall? They're
ridiculously tall. Trying to carry one is an experience. I feel like you turn around and it's a bit like you're in a comedy sketch with a ladder. They're long.
Yeah. Do you have any like particularly funny memories of rowing? Like, have you seen anything funny, like anything like that?
That's a good question. I mean, a lot of the amusing things are probably me laughing at other people on the river, which isn't great. But occasionally you see someone fall in, you have a little giggle at that once they're out. I mean, I've had to run through a river before. We got like pushed onto the bank and I had to push us off. That was amusing in retrospect. At the time with my soggy socks, I wasn't too happy. I mean, I think a lot of like my fun memories of rowing, I mean, I enjoy being in the boat, but come from like the social occasions that we have, because like the boat club is obviously like a sports club, but we do a lot of social stuff outside of it. We like have weekly different things. So I think a lot of my fun memories come from like making friends through that and like just having a generally good time with people, I would say.
Yeah. I don't know if people listening will know what a crew date is, but rowing crew dates are something that I think are the highlight of rowing socializing.
I would agree. I would definitely agree.
Yeah. And they're basically where 2 different teams from like different colleges, or even it can be within college, like the girls team and the boys team will go for like a curry typically, and it's basically a lot of drinking, and it kind of like it's all the kind of things that people who don't drink can also enjoy. Yeah.
I've definitely been to one and stayed sober throughout and still had a good time. I think it's really nice because that way you get to meet people at different colleges, which I think sometimes, depending on how social you are, can be quite difficult at Oxford because you stay a bit in your college bubble sometimes. But I think like I've met some very interesting characters on crew dates and like met friends I'm still friends with. I think crew dates are a very interesting experience, something you have to try if you're rowing at least once. And a rowing crew date is quite superior.
Yeah, I think they're the best kind of crew date that I've ever been to by miles.
Oh, that's high praise.
Yeah. Anyway, I won't talk about crew dates too much because I don't think that's too topical. So you're president of the boat club.
Yes.
What does that basically entail?
So I have my committee. So I have a men's captain, a women's captain, a treasurer, and a secretary, and I'm basically in charge of making sure they're doing their jobs, keeping everything running smoothly, making like they obviously have lots of questions that they necessarily don't know the answers to, so they can come to me because I've been at the boat club for 4 years and on committee for 3 years. So I generally know the answer to most questions, or I know who to ask. And then the big part of my role is kind of working with alumni. So we obviously have a lot of old members of the boat club who've graduated, but still kind of want to know how we're doing or want to like help out. So it's communicating with them. I have lots of like emails and some Skype calls with them, and working with college to kind of plan events that mean we can chat to alumni a bit more.
Yeah, it sounds good. I remember when I was secretary, a lot of the secretary stuff was kind of revolved around organising the dinner after summer eights. And at the time, like it felt like the biggest responsibility in the world. Like looking at menus, I was like, oh my God, this is terrible. So I can imagine being president is like that times 100.
Yeah, it feels quite a high responsibility sometimes because like the boat club has donors, because obviously it costs a lot of money to keep the boat club going, and a lot of old members donate. So it's quite stressful sometimes dealing with someone and kind of wanting to impress them, I guess, and like represent the boat club in the best way possible. Yeah, it can be quite high pressure, especially like we're obviously in a very weird situation at the moment. So I'm having to do a lot of like talking with college to try and work out what we're allowed to do and what we're not allowed to do and still be safe. So it feels like a lot of pressure because you're basically representing the entire boat club, but I'm hopefully doing an okay job.
Yeah, no, I would say so as a very current distant member of the boat club. What's been your favourite memory of just being involved in rowing over the past few years?
Ooh, that's really hard. My like immediate response would be getting blades because that was just amazing, and I don't think anyone expected us to do it. But I actually think my first bump as captain might be like my favorite thing that not ever happened, but we very much went into a race expecting to get bumped, and the boat behind us we were certain was going to catch us, and then we heard that the boat in front of us had bumped the boat in front of them, which basically means that they were no longer in the race and we'd have to catch that boat. So we had like 3 lengths to make up, which is quite a long distance when you're not rowing very far, and then we somehow managed it. And I just remember the feeling in the boat was just like surprise and like just absolute joy. And just like coming off the water and like celebrating with friends and family, and just like we still have 3 more days to go and anything could happen on those 3 days. But just like the joy of that first bump and like knowing we'd done that was just, that was, I think, my favorite memory. Yeah.
That's really nice. I think because I never did as well in racing. Like we never got blades. We bumped once. Anyway, beside the point. I think my kind of favorite memory was when we were training in Trinity term of second year, and we'd moved from kind of the normal stretch of the river, the Isis, to Godstow, which is kind of like a big lake where like some people roam, but it's much less quieter and it's like a wider stretch. And I think this sounds really silly now, but like it was when we were kind of really starting to come together as a team, and like it was like probably about 6:30 in the morning, and Godstow is such a nice place that like there was a really nice like sunrise and there were a few cows on the bank, and like we were rowing really well, and it just felt really like wholesome at the time.
Yeah, I think I'd agree. I think training sometimes when it clicks and you all kind of, because the thing is you spend a year training with these people, and like the boats usually stay quite consistent, so you get to really know the people in your crew, like either as a cox or as a rower. I think definitely when like it all clicks in training and like you're doing an early morning but you don't really mind it because you're like with people you like and things are going well, it's definitely like a really great feeling.
Yeah. Do you have any like worst memories of rowing? Is there anything that stands out?
Probably every time I've like crashed into the bank on an outing. I had like an upgrade assessment for my coxing. That was probably the worst experience just because it was so stressful. So basically, like there's different levels of coxes at Oxford, and like you can go out and like in worse weather conditions. Basically, the better a cox you are, and usually you get automatically upgraded because of everything going on. I had to do a test, and just the pressure that I felt, and I think it was like the first outing we'd had in an 8 in like 9 months. So the rowers were very rusty. I was very rusty. It was very stressful. I mean, it worked out okay, but I think that might be one of my worst rowing moments because I crashed quite early on. And then we made it work. We styled it out, but just the moment it happened, quite a low point.
Yeah, I think I've had quite a few near misses with there's a section of the river that's called the Gut, and it's basically a really sharp turn, and I've crashed into that before. I got in Torpids, actually. A boat bumped us, but they didn't stop in time, and their bow person's blade went over my head.
Ooh.
And that really hurt.
Yeah.
But I think that's quite, not to like put anyone off rowing with that, like it doesn't happen.
I think that's quite a rare event. Usually I think racing, there's probably once a year there's like a big crash, and even then quite often people don't get injured, but I think injuries are few and far between in rowing.
Yeah, generally it's fine. And I guess leading on from that, and for our like final question, what advice would you give to people either at Oxford already thinking about rowing, or people who are applying and think that they might row?
I'd say just give it a go. Like, I turned up to a taster event in Freshers Week being like, I'm absolutely not going to row. I went on the water. It was the worst experience of my life, but I somehow like got not forced, but persuaded to sign up, and I'm still here 3.5 years later, really enjoying it. I think like you might as well just give it a go. What is the worst that's going to happen? Like, the worst that's going to happen is you're going to go on an outing and maybe not enjoy it that much, and like you don't want to do it anymore. No one cares. So like just give it a go. It's kind of my advice. I think it's so great for like the social life, the chance to do sport, and like just getting outside regularly. I think it's easy, like especially in the winter months, it's easy to forget that the outside world exists, especially when you're stuck in libraries. So just give it a go. That's
really good advice. And I'm glad that I kind of got given that advice a couple of years ago. Like, I think it was a really rewarding thing to do.
Yeah, I think you can just try it. I mean, you can just dip in for a year and you might really enjoy that year, but that's all you have to do. Like, you're not making a lifetime commitment to rowing.
Yeah, and even then, even if you just try it once, it's like an hour out of your life for something that you could end up really liking. Yeah, well, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I hope people listening realise that rowing isn't just for posh people, and may hopefully give it a go in the future. But until then, thank you for joining me, Charlotte. Thank you to everyone who's listened, and make sure to check us out on social media at Oxford from the Inside. And take care, everyone. Bye.
Bye.